Hi there. Welcome back to Being in New Brunswick. On this episode, we're traveling to the Village of Stanley. Nestled in the forested folds of York County, Stanley has a very dreamy vibe, which makes it the perfect place to pick up our show after our discussion about being a dreamer. After about half an hour of wending slowly through New Brunswick's interior woods, Stanley emerges from the trees like a quaint little fictional town that somehow leaked into our reality. Visitors are welcomed with this sign, featuring some very cool, almost glowing, bucolic artwork, and that announces this as the home of the longest continuously running country fair in New Brunswick. While some town signs give only a place's name and its population, Stanley's offers us something about its population. Instead of Stanley, population 397, it's more like Stanley, population is capable of coming together to achieve impressive things. Some might think of this welcome sign as overly boastful, but I personally believe it's nice to give yourself recognition for things you're proud of having done. If you've ever organized any kind of event at all, be it a birthday party or bingo night, you know that for a community to get together and have a country fair even once is impressive. And every continuous year the fair has run is like a vote of confidence from the current community in the goodness of the original dream. I find myself kind of disappointed we weren't able to coordinate our trip around the fair. I'm not sure if you can tell just by looking at me, but I actually love livestock. And according to the town's Facebook page, this year's fair featured an inflatable nightclub. I don't know what that is, but inflatable nightclub is a very evocative phrase, isn't it? For some reason, when I first read it, I imagined a nightclub inflated, not with air, but with helium, tethered to the ground, but floating high in the sky. Strobe lights flashing, house music booming, like a party UFO full of rural abductees. This year's fair has already come and gone, but the dreaming spirit of the village, the one which has kept the fair running all these continuous years, is ever present, and you can feel it in the air. We thought we'd take a walk in the summer sun to check out the fairgrounds, and on our way, I had to pause to contemplate this strange building, or rather, its strange name. This is the Upper Nashwaak Agrena. Agrena? Yes, Agrena, with a G. I don't know about you. I've been to plenty of arenas, but never an agrena. From the outside, there is no obvious difference between this agrena and the arenas I've been to in the past. It's difficult to tell what the G in agrena denotes. Is it simply a portmanteau of the words agriculture and arena? Is an agrena just an arena that serves a traditionally agrarian area? I thought of the etymology of the word arena, from the Latin harena, which means sand, and refers to the sandy floor of ancient amphitheaters where gladiatorial combat took place. Is it possible an agrena gets its name from the Latin ager, meaning field? This is, after all, a venue built to host a game originally played on fields. Hockey began life as shinty and hurling and lacrosse, all stick and ball games played on wide green pastures. Is this the agrena then, or the adrena? I suppose it's just as likely it was a clerical error, a typo on a zoning approval form that just stuck. Or maybe the word agrena is a secret incantation, an old spell hiding in plain sight, whispered by generations of Stanley's minor hockey parents. the building does have a mysterious air. Maybe when Agrina is spoken out loud, the word unveils Stanley's deeper weirdness. Agrina, Agrina, Agrina. Kinda interesting, eh? We couldn't actually get inside, so the mystery hung potently with us and set the tone for the rest of our trip. Stanley, it turns out, is not just dreamy, it's dream-like. It almost feels assembled by dream logic. It is a town full of oniric eccentricities that make the whole place swell with intriguing strangeness. We continued our wacky walking tour at the site of another village idiosyncrasy. This is Stanley's Riverview Trail, which one might assume provides some scenic views of the Nashwaak River. It turns out, though, there's actually almost no view of the river on the Riverview Trail at all, which, interestingly, made for a more engaging experience. The lack of a view here seemed to heighten the other sensory experiences of walking near a river that might otherwise be ignored. Your ears pick up the white noise of the running Nashwaak. Your body senses the slight drop in air temperature as mist settles on your warm skin. You smell the cold and wet. These bits of sensory data help create a view of a river in your mind's eye. You view the river of your dreams, making the river viewed on the Riverview Trail unique for all people who walk it. Far out, man. On other riverside trails, the unobstructed river views can become boring. But if you do happen to spot water here, you will find the experience to be a rush. Pun intended. Stanley's trail designers seem to play on our propensity to take what's beautiful for granted by making us work a little bit to get what we may sometimes just feel entitled to, by making a river view feel like the reward that it truly is. The designers of public spaces in Stanley seem to be on a deeply spiritual bent, as we also found a few oblique views from benches in town. This doesn't seem to be a particularly good place for a bench, but by putting it here, you're prompted to sit for a while and encouraged to look more closely at these bushes, which you'd probably just overlook otherwise. And maybe there's something worth seeing once you actually take the time. I love this idea. It's basically the ethos of this show. That's the reason we're not just going to spend our time hitting Stanley's tourist areas. We want to hit the town's benches too. Live for a time as a real Stanleyite, one who might spend their lunch hour sitting at this vandalized table by the river. You know, as I sit here, I start imagining what it would be like to live my entire life in a little village like Stanley, apart from the rest of the outside world. I know intuitively lots of people have done exactly that. Whole lives have begun and ended in this one small area. But what would my everyday life be like if it were that scaled down? How would my perception of reality, of time, of self change if this was the extent of the world that I experienced and the people here were the only ones I interacted with? How would my dreams change? My destiny? Would I become absorbed into the strange life force of the town, or would the town become a part of my personal mythos? I daydreamed for a minute of being added to the Notable People section on the Village of Stanley's Wikipedia page. Notable People: longtime Stanley resident Alex Curtis, host of Being in New Brunswick. I have to imagine my chances of being a notable person on a Wikipedia page get better if the place is much smaller. Speaking of notable residents, there's another local oddity we came across, and a story about a very notable prior, or perhaps current, resident of Stanley that is conspicuously absent from all official record. This is Stan the Stone Snake. At first glance, it's a cute, folksy art project done by local school children, but its inspiration is pretty bizarre. We happened to meet and speak with a friendly local crone who saw us filming and told us the legend which likely gave this art project its name. I'll do my best here to paraphrase her story. In the early days of settlement of the area, an eccentric, velvet-gloved aristocrat emigrated here and bought up a wide swath of wooded land north of the Nashwaak, which he named Stanley's Hollow. It's said that he brought with him a collection of exotic pets, including a prized African rock python named Stanley. This aristocrat was mostly reclusive, but rumors spread about his strange relationship with his serpent companion. Some said he'd speak to it in Latin. Others said it answered back. Reports of the snake's size varied by those who claimed to have seen it, but consistent was the notion that it was an unnaturally large beast. This bizarre character and his abnormal pet unnerved the village's devout population, who didn't like the idea of a man consorting with a giant snake. His absence from church services made the villagers think that he might even be some kind of devil worshipper. Perhaps a relationship with the devil could even account for the man's otherwise inexplicable wealth. These early settlers were so unsettled, they decided they must drive the man and his snake from Stanley's Hollow. The villagers stormed his estate and demanded that the ophiophilic blasphemer hand Stanley over to them and extricate himself from the area for good. But he only denied that any such snake existed. The monster was an invention of their terrified religious imagination, a story spread and embellished by the morally panicked small-town rumor mill who feared him for his difference of dress and his unique tastes. But he couldn't assuage their fervor. Threats were made, the villagers forcibly searched his property, and they found there nothing. Some strange birds and reptiles, sure, but no giant snake. Unsatisfied, they demanded he leave the area anyway, which he did, though he didn't get far. His body was found washed up on the banks of the Nashwaak only days after this altercation. Foul play was strongly suspected, but no investigation was ever undertaken. In the weeks following the aristocrat's death, farmers began to report bizarre mutilations to their cattle. Chickens, pigs, goats, all vanished without a trace. Some residents claimed their barn cats refused to go outside after sundown, their spines arched, eyes fixed on the tree line. Then, sightings were reported of a giant gleaming body slipping through the reeds in the moonlight. Massive coils were found pressed into fresh snow. Multiple villagers reported seeing saucer-like glowing eyes staring at them from under the ostrich ferns in the spot where the aristocrat's body was found. When one of the men who was thought to be involved with the aristocrat's death also vanished, residents began to fear the worst. That the beast was not only real, but was supernatural, and was now seeking vengeance for his master's untimely end. They began giving livestock as offerings, left on the riverbank every year around the anniversary of the man's disappearance. Some believe this tradition is still covertly carried out every summer under the guise of being a country fair, but that's purely conjecture. Over time, what was formerly known as Stanley's Hollow became shortened to just Stanley. The villagers, too afraid to change the name, were relieved at the pleasant coincidence that Queen Victoria's Prime Minister was called Lord Stanley, and so they just credited the namesake to him. Apparently, it's still superstition not to discuss the true origins of Stanley's name, and so the story has been largely suppressed and fudged in official accounts of the town's history. But anyone who has lived here long enough has heard about the York County basilisk. At least that was this lady's story. We were incredulous, to say the least. As a logician, I don't usually go in for hokum. As she walked away, I thought to myself, well, it's not a true story, but it is a good one. And as if she'd heard this thought, she stopped, turned, and called back, "Beware ye non-believers." And at that, things got kind of freaky. What sounded like a low hiss could be heard just above the wind in the trees, and the weather took a sudden, unfavorable turn. Stanley was soon a wet dream. A very wet dream. We fled the downpour, which was accompanied by thunder and lightning, and sought refuge in the nearest gas station.
Nice.
At least, that's what we thought it was. It turned out there was much more than just your standard sundries inside. At this point, I'd like to give a caveat. I am a staunch anti-consumerist.
The only thing for ants is trash.
Therefore, it pains me to confess that I feel comforted and safe when surrounded by shelves of brightly colored retail goods. I find walking through a supermarket has an almost narcotic effect on me. Maybe it's an association I have from riding in shopping carts as a child, strapped in tightly, pushed around by a trusted adult, awestruck by the panoply of boxes and bottles and plastic packages displayed in neat monolithic rows under fluorescent lights, with some soporific muzak or yacht rock radio station bouncing around in the cool cathedral of the grocery store. My jittery soul found ease in Tomlinson's, and soon I forgot all about the cryptid I may have unwittingly angered outside. I was lost in a technicolor dream. I just adore packaging. The idea that it imitates nature by using design and color to stimulate the eyes in order to entice us to eat it. I also like the alchemical implications of taking something inside a cardboard box and transforming it into something that we can consume, which will give us nourishment and will taste like something other than a cardboard box. Beyond being a feast for the senses, the general store items here are fascinating because they tell the story of Stanley's people at this particular moment in time. These items were chosen based on the wants and needs of the small community they serve. Meticulously curated enough that one might say the store is as close to a museum as it is to a marketplace. Consumer products reveal things about our collective dreams. The things sold on shelves are made in the image of what we value, what we aspire to, what we dream of. And especially these items, stocked in Tomlinson's, not a chain retail store, but a singular place in Stanley, New Brunswick, tell the story of the people who it serves. This collection is unique to Stanley's people. As such, this footage gathered inside Tomlinson's also acts as a time capsule. What we value changes over time. I saw in the background, while I was watching an episode of Mr. Bean recently, a landline telephone on sale in a department store for 79 GBP. That item today is basically worthless, except maybe as a novelty. Maybe one day someone will look at this bounty of food and take their high-calorie, satiety-inducing nutrient pill and think to themselves, I can't believe we used to buy and eat all that useless crud. As you can see, I wanted to take as much footage inside as I could to crystallize this moment in time. I started to wonder about the dreamers who dreamt up these products in the first place, particularly some of the odder ones. Who are these visionaries? Could they have ever known that their powdered hollandaise sauce mix would make it all the way from their imagination to a small New Brunswick town in the middle of the woods, to be displayed proudly on the shelves of the town general store? And what about the graphic designers who created the packaging? Isn't being stocked, in a way, tantamount to having your work hung in a gallery? And the shop owner, de facto curator of this collection, who ordered these items and then arranged them on the shelves. He, too, also gives them new meaning. Of course, these items are not finished their journeys yet. If all goes according to plan, the powdered hollandaise will one day become sauce, used to coat poached eggs, maybe shared by two lovers on a bright summer morning after a night of passion. Then it will become their waste and will be expelled from their bodies and flushed and join a river of wastewater, become treated, and then released back into New Brunswick's beautiful waterways. It all makes me dream about how far this video will travel. As we continued to look around, a woman rushed in and asked rather urgently about whether they had mayonnaise here. Maybe she was just sitting at home and was struck with a craving for a sandwich with mayonnaise. Maybe that became her dream for 10 minutes, and Tomlinson's helped her see it through. It was such a genuine pleasure to see her joy at finding some. I know this feeling. When you need something and you think to yourself, I'll see if the gas station has it. Maybe because, as in Stanley, it'll save you a trip all the way into Fredericton if you can get it in town. If that were the case, Tomlinson's gifted this woman an hour or more of lifetime. And if the mayonnaise woman were to come into Tomlinson's asking after mayonnaise and they hadn't had any, well, I'll bet the act of someone searching for mayonnaise would prompt the proprietor to order some to add to his collection. In that way, it's possible she would have changed the landscape of her world with her dream, even if it hadn't come true. Again, folks, we are dream fruit. I'm happy for Mayonnaise Lady. She seemed nice. The rain continued to pour outside. We exited Tomlinson's and hid under a tree for a while, trying to stay dry. And since I was in a philosophical mood, I started thinking, depending on how you look at it, getting caught in the rain can be either pain or suffering. Getting wet when it's raining out causes momentary discomfort, but once you're wet, you're wet. And it's not all that bad, it's just a bit of a pain. But trying to stay dry and getting even a little bit wet is a form of suffering. Pain is always better than suffering. Once you're all wet, there's none of you left to get wet. You no longer have to fight to keep any part of yourself dry. You know what I'm trying to say. It's not the getting wet that sucks. It's fighting to stay dry when it's pouring rain. In other words, it's not always that reality sucks as much as our desire to live some other life makes it suck. You got that's what I was trying to say, right? And you can see how that relates to the broader message of this show. So after deciding to give up fighting to stay dry, we carried on walking, and soon I was back to daydreaming. Another of my lingering dreams is owning my own horse and riding him to town. It's the ultimate eco-friendly vehicle. I would strap on my saddlebags for small grocery runs to Tomlinson's. I'd wave to my neighbors as they drove past me, their children's faces pressed to the windows and back seats in wondrous awe. I'd give them a tip of my hat. My loyal dog would pad along behind us. This is one of those dreams I always return to when I think about the life I would have if I moved to a small town. I don't think owning a horse in the suburbs or a metropolitan area would work, and it would be very upsetting for the horse, so this dream is just for the country. For some reason in this dream, I'm always the owner of a family restaurant. That's where I'm riding my horse. And as if there wasn't enough symmetry between Stanley and my dream life already, we came across a diner here that happens to be for sale. I imagine running a place like the Longhorn Coffee Shop and Bakery, which for those who don't know is the diner in the music video for Shania Twain's Whose Bed Have Your Boots Been Under? That place feels out of a dream. As a kid, a diner seemed to me like the place where working class adults went to commune with each other, to commiserate about being working men and women, to share a laugh and a cup of joe, to silently acknowledge that the difficulty associated with being alive in the modern world was worth enduring if for no other reason than to experience the fellowship of man embodied here with a friendly nod of the head while raising a hot cuppa. Diner ambience is great, especially in the Shania music video. I don't know if it's the sensitive 90s film stock look, the soft morning light diffused by floating coffee steam, or just the fact that young Shania Twain is literally what I imagine angels are supposed to look like, but watching that video, as I've done many times, feels like sinking gently into a pleasant dream for 4 minutes and 25 seconds. In the diner or family restaurant of my dreams, there'd be a jukebox with all my favorite music on it. And people would actually want to listen to what I want to listen to. It'd be a place for townsfolk to discuss the books they're reading, to trade ideas about art, have philosophical discourse, talk respectfully about differences of opinion regarding socio-political issues, a place for people to laugh together, all over a slice of warm, homemade pie stuffed with locally sourced, seasonal ingredients. We'd have booths upholstered with red vinyl and red checkerboard tablecloths, some of those old stained glass hanging lights with a fruit bowl or something on it. We'd host the occasional punk show, but nothing would get damaged. We would have D&D nights, maybe have a bunch of TVs like at a sports bar, but when it wasn't game time, they'd play early 90s skate videos. Or maybe just whatever is playing on the Criterion channel. It would be a real cultural hub, in other words. Couldn't you imagine that place? I sure can. I actually love this dream so much that I did a painting of it. Just as your dreams can sometimes brighten your day, the sky too filled with the sun again, and before long we were walking back toward the car in life-giving sunlight. I got excited for a minute when I saw this sign that advertised video rentals. Another business I've thought for a while about starting was a video rental business. Maybe to get ahead of the next retro curiosity trend, and perhaps there was a model for success right here in Stanley. But it turned out that this is just the site of a former video rental store, and the sign was only a reminder of the passage of time and the way that things inevitably change. I wonder which videos, rented from this corner store, changed the course of someone's life. What movie moved the bar for someone's dreams of what's possible a little bit higher? What movie was the first someone rented and watched after a bad breakup? What movie would you go to for comfort in that situation? Is it possible that a person living in this town, right now, was conceived while a video rented from this corner store played in the background? I wonder if someone who, say, went to high school here, used to dream of making movies of their own someday, and dreamt of seeing them on a shelf here. Movies that they could pick up and admire the box art, and hand it to the clerk saying, "This one's mine, and it would never have existed without this place. Thank you." It's nice to have some dreams like this to be able to go to replay in your head, like a feel-good movie you rent over and over again, if for no other reason than to be reminded of who you are in your dreams. Which is why it's so sad that that dream is no longer possible. It's tough to accept, but sometimes we have to let go of some of our most cherished dreams. Thinking about the very last video that was rented from here almost makes me emotional. Video stores were ritualized spaces that all just totally disappeared pretty much overnight. I don't even remember what the last movie I rented was. I wish I knew now. I think it might have been What About Bob or Metallica's Some Kind of Monster. I think I can make peace with that. Letting go of one dream allows us to begin another. While we didn't manage to find any video rentals here, we did each come away with a popsicle. It's easy to think about living the life of your dreams and imagine all the big ones coming true. But life includes millions of little moments, and in a true life of one's dreams, the little stuff would all be just right too. So you shouldn't forget to be grateful when something small turns out perfectly. That is a moment where you are living inside the life of your dreams. These popsicles were the popsicles of my dreams. They had been stored at an optimal ambient temperature, probably rotated regularly to avoid any freezer burn, and on this hot day were melting at a rate so that the popsicle was texturally perfect. Not to mention, the freezer happened to be stocked with both of our favorite flavors, and each of us had a friend to share the moment with. It was a little taste of the life of our dreams. Some places just seem to inspire dreaming in you. You go somewhere, and you can imagine yourself fitting in there seamlessly. I look at some benches, and I can instantly imagine myself sitting on them, while I look at others that don't inspire any feeling in me at all. It's not that they look more comfortable or have a better view. It's just a feeling. A feeling that your story is connected to certain people, places. That's why sometimes I believe we make fewer choices than are made for us. Did I really choose to come to Stanley today? Or did Stanley pull me into its orbit? In trying to explain why I find Stanley dreamy, I realized it's silly. To another person who belongs to Stanley, no explanation is required. And to someone who's not a Stanley person, no amount of convincing will help. In some ways, Stanley seems to be a dream that's being forgotten. But a forgotten dream does not just disappear. It drifts on, like something carried down a river, ready to wash up on the shore of some new consciousness. Thank you for joining me on this trip to Stanley, New Brunswick, and I look forward to seeing you again on the next episode of Being in New Brunswick.